Murder in the Mermaid Lagoon by Evie Steele.
Celeste Nash was an intimidating woman. At 6'2", she could see well over the heads of most of her male peers. Men rarely bothered to approach her, her height alone seemed to scare them off. And here she was, on a Friday night, sitting in a freezing cold restaurant, waiting for the blind date her best friend Naomi had insisted she meet. He was already 10 minutes late, with no text, no call. She was probably being stood up, and to be honest, she was too tired to care. She flipped through the menu, fully intending to order enough pasta to undo a week's worth of her brutal new trainer at the gym. If nothing else, she'd eat well tonight. While she studied the pasta selection, her mind already on garlic bread, she felt a presence looming over her. Assuming it was her waiter, Javier, she rattled off her order without looking up. That was why she'd chosen Angelino's. She knew the staff, she knew the menu. Even if the date was a disaster, at least the food and service wouldn't be. "Nothing for me, little lady," drawled a deep voice, warm and rough at the edges. Celeste's eyes lifted, slowly, and locked onto a man drenched from head to toe, rain dripping from the ends of his sandy hair onto the polished floor. He had a Cajun accent, stood at least 6'7", and looked completely disheveled, but somehow, all that just made him impossibly more handsome. "I think I am in love," she blurted before she could stop herself. Heat flooded her cheeks, her warm brown skin turning a mortifying shade of red that clashed with her long auburn hair. He gave a wry smile, water sliding from his jawline to his collar. "Glad you approve. Sorry for my tardiness, and the lack of communication. I've run into the most astounding complications this evening." He extended a broad hand, palm still damp. "My name is Ray LaSalle. It is my pleasure to meet you." The man presented a conundrum of questions and concerns. Why was he soaking wet? Why was he so late? Why hadn't he called or texted? And, most frustrating of all, why did he have to be so absurdly handsome? Celeste's mind raced in circles, searching for something clever or at least coherent to say, but every possible response tangled up with the next. She couldn't pick a single direction to steer the conversation. As if sensing that she was overwhelmed, Ray took pity on her confusion and began to explain before she could manage a word. "I'm afraid my phone was the first casualty of the evening," he said, voice low and apologetic. "So I was unable to call or text you." "Oh, okay, that's fine," Celeste said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "Why don't you sit down, and I'll call the waiter over. We can get some warm food. And you may want to take off your jacket, this restaurant is really, really cold." Ray smiled gratefully and settled into the chair across from her, shrugging out of his drenched coat. A moment later, Javier appeared at the table, not missing a beat despite Ray's sodden state. He took the drink orders and a round of appetizers while Celeste decided, for once, to hold off on committing to a main course until she knew a little more about the man sitting across from her. Ray folded his hands on the table, his expression open and earnest. "Well," he began, "I suppose I should just get on with the story and tell you exactly what happened today." Celeste nodded, curiosity piqued. "I was standing outside my office when a rather unfortunate-looking fellow approached me and mugged me at gunpoint," Ray said matter-of-factly. "I would have just let him take my wallet, but then he grabbed the purse of an elderly woman who'd been waiting nearby. At that point, I chased him down and knocked him into the fountain, right in the middle of Raleigh, if you can believe it. Unfortunately, that's why my phone no longer works." He paused, brushing a hand sheepishly over his damp hair. "Again, I'm terribly sorry for being late and, well, disheveled. I promise you, I don't usually look like this." Celeste felt a smile blooming on her lips despite herself. His tone was so warm and sincere she couldn't imagine he was anything but truthful. "It's fine," she assured him. "Did the lady get her purse back?" "Of course," Ray said, his eyes bright. "I would never abandon a damsel in distress." The ice between them thawed quickly. They lingered over appetizers, trading stories about their workdays. Ray shared how he was an up-and-coming marketing executive at a local firm, while Celeste told him about her career as a marine biologist at the new North Carolina Aquarium in Raleigh. Two completely different worlds, but both driven by curiosity and passion. The conversation flowed so easily that, before they knew it, they had ordered dessert. The night seemed to twinkle around them, full of laughter and warmth. For the first time in a very long while, Celeste found herself on a date she genuinely didn't want to end. Everything had gone so well. They'd even shared a generous helping of cheesecake, an Angelino's specialty. Javier discreetly left the check at the edge of the table. Celeste noticed Ray's expression shift. He looked suddenly, unmistakably uncomfortable. "Well," he began, voice a little too casual, "in all the confusion, I seem to have neglected to actually retrieve my wallet from the mugger." He blinked as if he'd only just realized it. Celeste, who was hardly hurting for money, she was at the top of her field, felt a flicker of unease. As a good Southern woman, she'd grown up expecting that gentlemen paid for dates, but she reminded herself he'd been quite forthcoming about everything else. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded and reached for her card. It's all right, she said quietly. Thank you, Ray replied, relief visible in the slope of his shoulders. I'll Venmo you later, of course. She appreciated that. They made their way to the front of the restaurant, stepping out into the humid summer air, and began walking toward their respective parking decks. I had a wonderful time, Ray said. His voice was warm, familiar now. I hope to see you again. Celeste was still glowing from the evening's conversation, but she couldn't quite ignore the persistent, needling feeling in the back of her mind that something wasn't right. I had a great time, too, she said. Hopefully we can do this again. Ray fell into step beside her, matching her stride. Oh, are you parked on this deck, too? She asked. No, he said easily. I just want to make sure you get to your car safely. Her instincts prickled. On the surface, he was being a gentleman. It was late. The parking deck was nearly empty. But something in her gut was screaming. She couldn't have explained why, and she hated herself for it, but she slid her hand into her pocket, fingers curling around the small canister of mace and her folding knife. Ray was watching her, watching every movement. But his smile still reached his eyes. She tried to shake it off. She tried to be rational. She was being ridiculous. She was overreacting. But the closer she got to her car, the louder the alarm bells in her mind rang. As she reached the top of the stairs, her car finally came into view. A shaky breath of relief escaped her lips, only 10 or 15 feet away. All right, she said, forcing her tone to stay light. Thank you for walking me this far. You don't have to come the rest of the way. I'm sure you'd like to get home and change out of those wet clothes. Oh, it's no trouble, he said smoothly. I'll make sure you get right up to the door. Her breath hitched. There's no need for that, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We've exchanged numbers. I'll text you when I get home. You do the same, okay? He studied her, noticing the shift in her body language. After a moment, he took a step back. She turned and walked faster, her keys clutched so tightly in her hand they dug crescents into her palm. She was exactly 2 feet from her driver's side door when tires screamed somewhere behind her. Before she could turn, something slammed into her like a battering ram. She hit the pavement so hard it knocked the air from her lungs. Gunshots exploded around her, sharp cracks that reverberated through the concrete deck. Screams. It took her a second to realize they were her own. What is happening? Why is this happening? What do I do? All the action movies she'd ever watched, all the self-defense classes she'd ever taken, and all she could do was sob. She felt a body over hers, pressing her down, shielding her. Ray, she gasped, voice ragged. What's going on? Shush, he murmured. His tone was calm, terrifyingly controlled. When I tell you, you're going to get up, run to your car, and drive straight to the nearest police station. Okay, she whimpered, her heart slamming against her ribs. He began to rise, one hand braced on the ground. From inside his jacket, he drew a gun, sleek, black, and purposeful. Go, he barked. She scrambled to her feet. He turned and fired down the length of the deck as she threw herself into the driver's seat, her hands shaking so badly she could barely jam the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and she sped out of the parking lot, tires screeching over the concrete. What is going on? Passed, though to Celeste it sometimes felt like only days. After the shooting outside the restaurant, she'd told herself to slow down. To be cautious, to look at Ray with clearer eyes. But somehow he kept drawing her back. He called her the next morning, apologetic, warm, his voice a gentle balm over the frayed edge of her fear. He'd insisted on meeting her for brunch in broad daylight. Over steaming mugs of coffee, he explained the incident. Police think it was a gang initiation, Ray told her, eyes dark with regret. There's been a spike in shootings all over Raleigh. Random targets, usually young couples. I hate that you were caught up in it. He looked genuinely sick about it. She wanted to believe him. She told herself it wasn't his fault. They kept seeing each other after that, always a little more carefully. At first, she insisted they meet only in crowded places, museum galas, the aquarium's after-hours mixer, the bright, noisy cafes on Glenwood Avenue. But soon enough, she found herself sitting across from him in dim restaurants again, lingering after the check was paid, letting him walk her to her car even though she knew she shouldn't. It was his steadiness she craved. The way he could be both protective and patient. Sometimes they'd spend hours talking, about her plans to open an eco-education nonprofit, about his vague references to consulting work that took him overseas. Other times, the nights ended in his apartment, where he'd lay a hand on her cheek and kiss her so slowly it made her knees weaken. One weekend in late spring, she finally agreed to spend the night. In the soft glow of his bedroom lamp, he traced circles along her spine, listening as she whispered about her father's death when she was a girl, about how she and her cousin Casey were more like sisters than cousins. Ray never shared as much. When she asked about his family, he would press a kiss to her forehead and say, some stories are better left in the dark. She let him keep his shadows. For a while, it was enough just to feel safe in his arms. At the end of May, they took a day trip down to Carolina Beach. He taught her how to fire a handgun at the little shooting range behind the dunes. She told herself it was only practical, given what had happened. She almost convinced herself it was a normal precaution, nothing more. When she asked again why he was so good with weapons, he only shrugged. Old training, he said. Some jobs don't let you forget. She didn't push. By the time June rolled around, she was spending most weekends at his place. He'd stocked her favorite coffee pods in his cabinet and given her a drawer in his dresser. It felt dangerous in a way she couldn't name, like stepping out onto thin ice, hearing it crack beneath her and pretending not to notice. But when she was with him, she wanted to believe she was safe. Until on one June morning she realized she never would be again.
Join Celeste, Ray, and whoever is trying to kill her in the next video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more content like this.